I have so many people I got to thank, so please bear with me for a second. First of all, my deepest gratitude to our former Lieutenant Governor, Barbara Lawden, for that incredible introduction. Thank you, Barbara. I wouldn't be here without you. To all of our introductory speakers, Keith Stanley, Amanda Stuck, Mrs. Mattis, my first grade teacher, Lisa Caesar, thank you so much for hosting us here, and Philip, our amazing MC. Let's give everyone a round of applause. We have amazing staff without whom today would not be possible. And I want to start by recognizing our amazing Olikara for Senate campaign staff. Raise your hand, guys. We got Victoria and Garrett and Stacy and Danny and all of our volunteers who are here today. Thank you guys so much. And truly, being here at No Studios is the perfect venue to announce our U.S. Senate campaign. This is a space that's committed to arts and entrepreneurship and social change. And to Lisa and her staff and all of her volunteers, we are so humbled. We're so grateful to be here at No Studios. And to John Ridley and his family, to have your support means a lot. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. And to the band, you guys have been rocking it. My musical debut will be coming soon in this campaign, but let's give them a round of applause. And to all of you for being here, taking time out on a Tuesday to join us. I'm so humbled by your presence, and I'm humbled by your insistence and your conviction, your belief that we don't have to settle for a hate-filled and division-filled politics, that we can choose a better way, that we have the courage to wake up from this dark political moment and elevate a more inclusive and honest and compassionate form of politics. It means a lot because sometimes articulating a new vision and being out there trying to change the game, it can feel lonely at times. But for all of you to stand with me and to believe in that, it means the world to me. So let's give yourselves a round of applause. Well, I think it's safe to say I'm an unusual person to be standing up here right now. I'm the proud son of Indian immigrants. I think when my parents came to Wisconsin, this was not part of the plans, was it? Okay, it wasn't. I didn't think so. Just by standing here, getting involved in politics, this whole moment could not have been a more foreign concept to me when I was growing up. Like a good Indian son, I figured I'd become an engineer, and engineering would really be my future. But I found my calling in politics in an unexpected place. It was playing music. It was being our musicians here on stage at a lot of different events around the greater Milwaukee area. And I learned something really powerful from playing music. See, first of all, I played in just about every kind of band you can imagine. I had multiple rock bands, jazz groups, a folk band, a 70s era funk band that covered James Brown and Earth, Wind and Fire. We had an Eastern European folk band called the Red Squares. Where's Michael? He was part of a lot of these bands. And we were popular in the Milwaukee Jewish community there for a little while. And all across the board, I had a hip-hop band with a professional breakdancer and a turntables guy. You can't make this up. And here's what I learned through all of those experiences, and it became my fundamental DNA in politics. It's this basic idea that when diverse groups of people come together in a space of openness and empathy and curiosity, the art form that resulted was more dynamic, more original, more inclusive. It didn't dilute the art. It brought us to a better place together, and it was a way that we're able to connect and learn about each other along the way. You know, Michael here can tell you we would come home so often and just play music. That's really how we caught up with each other. I think music is one of the great communicators, and in a time of great division, I think there's a lot we can learn about music when we think about our politics. You know, I learned that the number one skill in playing music is listening. Jazz is a call and response art form, just like democracy can be at its best. But as all of you know, our politics has devolved into more of a call and shut down culture. We're not listening to each other anymore. We often are demonizing and dehumanizing people in the name of political profit. This rise of a hate-filled politics, it's unsustainable for our democracy. It's not just about our inability to solve problems in the short term. It's really what kind of political system, what kind of democracy are we going to pass on to our children and grandchildren? And so at a certain point, we have to say we need a change and we need to stand up for it. And that's the mind space I was in when we founded Millennial Action Project. And thank you so much, Amanda, for all the kind things you said about our work together. You know, Millennial Action Project was premised on the idea that we can build diverse coalitions and our legislators can enact tangible changes to help those who have been left out. And that might sound idealistic, but in practice, we're able to make real, concrete results happen. One of the accomplishments I'm most proud of goes back to my time at UW-Madison. By the way, do we have any Badgers in the audience here? All right. I'm very proud to have been the very first environmental studies major to graduate from UW-Madison. And the challenge of taking on climate change is personal for me. And fast forwarding 6 years after graduating, I found myself in a room in the United States Capitol with a group of our members of Congress who were involved in Millennial Action Project. We had a few people there who hadn't even come out publicly on climate change yet or hadn't even articulated their position yet. But they were willing to build a coalition by the end of that meeting and come together around a bill to save and expand the funding of a clean energy program. And we got that passed through a Republican-controlled Congress. You know, I was proud that last fall when we had the challenge of running an election during the pandemic, and we saw how much the election system might be undermined. I was proud that our organization was able to form the only bipartisan coalition of sitting elected officials to stand up for safe voting in our state and help to strengthen and promote the absentee voting system last fall. And the one that probably hit me the most happened after the tragic shooting in Parkland, a time when we were all wondering, can our country do anything about the cancer of gun violence? And the conventional wisdom was, well, this issue is too divisive to work on. It's too polarizing. We can't come together on it. But very quietly, we had been building the relationships in Congress for a group of people to come together to say something very simple, that the Centers for Disease Control should be authorized and funded to study gun violence as a public health issue. And we're able to get that done and get that one passed as well. Real change. So each of these legislative changes are impactful on their own, but they tell a deeper story that I learned playing jazz here in Milwaukee, which is when you're willing to listen, when you're going to be curious, when you have a true call and response conversation, you not only build the coalitions to make real change, but you start to reinstill a new faith in the democratic process. And that is what we need today. And that is why we are ready to take that movement to the next level. And with that mission of forming a new and inclusive politics in our state and in the United States Senate, today, at this inflection point in our democracy, It is with great humility and conviction that today I announce our campaign for the United States Senate representing the great state of Wisconsin. And we're going to take the best of what we learned on the campaign trail. See, we have this radical idea that the number one skill of a U.S. senator should be listening. And that's why over the last few months, we had an exploratory committee, and we conducted a dignity tour across the state of Wisconsin to hear from voters who've been feeling disenfranchised. We went to Western Wisconsin hearing from dairy farmers who talked about how much they're on the verge of bankruptcy, how so many of the federal benefits are going off into the big agro businesses, not to the small family farmers. We hosted a roundtable with entrepreneurs, including formerly incarcerated entrepreneurs here in Milwaukee. And we heard a powerful story of a young woman who was trying to get her printing shop off the ground and trying to get an investment from a bank. And she talked about the indignity of checking the ex-felon box when she was trying to get a loan, and how that not only was a limitation on getting investment, but also how it affected her sense of dignity, her sense of self-confidence. I've talked to so many small business owners right now who are watching the food fight in Washington, and they're wondering, who's out there looking out for me? Where's our relief coming? See, that's the insidious thing about this political system as it is right now. While the politicians have the food fight at the top, the people who are suffering the most are those at the bottom, the most vulnerable, the most people who are susceptible to these shocks from the political system. That's what we have to change. Now, part of the problem we need to look at here is how we can have a positive agenda. See, it's the easiest thing in politics right now to just say what you're against and just demonize other people. The more important path for us is to say what we're for, to build a positive agenda that will bring people together. And so we're engaging Wisconsinites around 3 big goals, and this will be the beginning of a conversation we'll have over the next year. The first big goal for us is integrity in politics. And the way we get there is by fundamentally changing the business model of campaigns. Let me give you a little picture of this. Right now, after we elect our representatives, often what happens, especially if they're in a competitive seat, they're going to go to Washington, D.C. and spend the majority of their time raising money and dialing for dollars. Now, I think it's just common sense here that if you want to do your job well, you need to put in the time doing your job, right? That's not what's happening in Washington right now. They're spending a majority of their time not doing their job. That's why I think we need to change the campaign finance system so our legislators are prepared and able to do the work of legislating and not become telemarketers. Here's another impact of the money and politics system right now. Because legislators are so beholden to the biggest money interests and the biggest special interests who dominate the agenda, the concerns of the small business owner I met in Elkhorn, or the social worker I met up in Kewaunee County who's looking for some broadband access, their issues are not on the agenda. They're catering to the biggest moneyed interests. But something else happens too. See, every election we often ask people, come out and vote. On top of that, I think everyone should have the opportunity to run for office too. But right now, working class people cannot realistically run for office much of the time. And I think the people at the bottom should have the ability to run for office and be the agenda setters in Washington, D.C. So that's why we have to change our campaign finance system so it's more inclusive. Those, among many other reforms, getting rid of gerrymandering, expanding voting rights, these are things that we need to do to bring integrity and trust back into our political system. Another big goal of ours is opportunity. Opportunity for those who've been left out, especially in our economy. See, I think we actually measure economic success in a too narrow of a way. We only seem to look at GDP, but we're not looking at economic success in a broader sense. What's your level of fulfillment? your happiness, your sense of dignity in your work. I think we need to create a set of economic policies that truly embrace that. And that means making sure that people who need skills training to be able to go to technical and vocational colleges are able to do that. That people have healthcare security and portable benefits so they can take the risk on that new venture, on the passion project that they have. I think we need to dramatically reorient our economy to make sure that people who've been left out are actually included in their economy moving forward. So opportunity is going to be a big agenda, and also we'll make sure that finally and once for all, our rural communities will have accessible and affordable broadband access so they can attract and retain young people in their communities as well. The third big goal you see on some of the signs here, dignity for all. You know, if there's one big contribution I'm able to make in politics, it's elevating a more humanitarian kind of politics. You know, being able to see people who've been truly left out and their humanity denied. One of the communities I reached out to at the beginning of this process are people with disabilities. And people who are facing various issues with disabilities is a much bigger issue than you realize. And one of the things that I heard over and over again was how we need to update the Americans for Disabilities Act, because it's not just about equal access to employment, for example. It's also about equal access to enjoyment. You know, making sure that there are ASL interpreters at places like concerts and movie theaters. You know, they deserve to have the dignity of enjoyment just like we do. So that's going to be a big part of our focus. You know, another big issue we heard as we were traveling across the state is how much mental health is a concern as well. We need to dramatically expand coverage for mental health and make sure we expand the number of providers that we have in rural parts of our state as well. You know, and the other thing we need to look at, and this is very personal for me, is that our children should have the dignity of having a livable planet in the future. And that's why, as part of my top agenda in the United States Senate, I'll be introducing bipartisan climate change legislation. And the other big part of this, and I've worked with a number of people in the room here on this issue, is criminal justice reform and making sure that people who've been in our prisons have a real second chance at life. They're able to get investment for their businesses. They're seeing the dignity of their abilities as they come out. And we're able to reform the prison system itself so we don't have people with nonviolent offenses spending years and years in prison wasting their lives and being separated from their families. So we will have criminal justice reform and do it in a bipartisan way. And with all of these ideas, I hope we always remember that jazz mindset. It's not about finding the least common denominator. It's about listening with a sense of curiosity and finding the best ideas no matter where they come from, and have the courage to build the coalitions that are required to pass those bills. That's the job of a U.S. Senator, and over the next year, we will be modeling that kind of leadership. You know, we will be, I'm glad constituent services came up earlier. We'll be doing constituent services along the way because that's part of the job. And we've had an incumbent in office who's been neglecting that. We'll be listening to communities. We'll be crafting legislative solutions together. We'll be doing this the right way. So I just want to close with this. Too often in the media, we hear about the dark side in politics. We hear about how Wisconsin has become this symbol of polarization and trench warfare politics. You know, I don't think that's our true character. You know, I think there is a light side to politics, and I think that there is a feeling inside of us that's waiting to be awakened. And I think I saw that most when, for 2 years, I traveled across the state hosting what we called red and blue dialogues. These were dialogues that brought together legislators and constituents together across the spectrum, focusing on specific issues and hearing from people who feel disillusioned by the process. We actually have people here, Rich and Lena, who went to a majority of those red and blue dialogues. Great to see you both. And here's what I learned. that generous spirit of Wisconsinites, that spirit of hospitality and warmth and kindness, it's there for us. It's just beneath the surface. And what we need are leaders who are willing to summon it, who are willing to bring that spirit to the surface. So those red and blue dialogues really taught me that Wisconsin doesn't have to be the symbol of trench warfare politics. We can be the symbol of inclusive and compassionate and honest politics. That's within us. I'll just end with this story. You know, to be up here, it's a little crazy. And there are a number of conversations we had over the past year when we were thinking about this. And I wanted to share one with you that really helped push me over the edge. You know, for 10 years, I've been studying the Dr. King philosophy, to understand, how is it that in the face of discrimination, he maintained his faith in radical love? How is it in the face of physical violence that he had the magnanimous personality to keep seeing the best in each other? And so last year, my organization, we hosted a training with his family. And his eldest son, Martin Luther King III, spent a whole day with us. And I had a conversation with him towards the end where I was able to ask him a question that had been on my mind for a long time. I said, Mr. King, how would your father be responding to the polarization and the disillusionment of this moment? And he simply replied by saying something that really entered my soul on a deep level. He said, Stephen, my father would be calling us to a higher order. He would be calling us to a higher order of politics. And then he said, that's what you're trying to do. And it's now time to take it to a new audience, to a larger audience. So I took that as a call to action. I believe we can call Wisconsinites to a higher order of politics, but we need the courage to see it. We need the conviction to build around it. We need the belief to organize it and the vision to bring people together around that mission. And it's within our grasp. If you're willing to organize for that, and if you feel just as passionately as I do, then we will create this movement. We will not just win the election next year, but we will be able to take this positive agenda to the U.S. Senate. It's within our grasp. So I hope we remember that as we leave today. This will require the active participation of all of us. I believe this is a movement whose time has come. There's no better time than now. There's no better people than us. Thank you all very much for being here. Let's go win this race, and let's get to work. Thank you all very much. I love you guys. Thank you. Thank you.